The sound of a tow truck winch tightening against a chrome bumper at 6 in the morning is, objectively speaking, an awful noise, a metallic, grinding screech that cuts right through the suburban quiet, but when that bumper belongs to a midnight black Cadillac Escalade that's been holding your driveway hostage for 3 months, let me tell you, it sounds like a choir of angels singing hallelujah. I stood there on my porch, mug of coffee in hand, watching the cable pull taut, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I wasn't just a resident of Oakhaven Creek, I was the guy who finally decided to pull the trigger. See, this wasn't just about a parking spot, and it wasn't just about the car, it was about Brenda Vance, a woman who treated our homeowners association like her own personal fiefdom and treated the rest of us like serfs who should be grateful for the privilege of paying dues. You know the type I'm talking about, the kind of person who measures their self-worth by how many regulations they can cite from memory, the woman who walks her poodle not to get exercise but to inspect your mulch levels, and Brenda was the queen bee of them all, a woman with hair sprayed so stiff it could withstand a hurricane and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I'm Caleb, by the way, just a landscape architect who wanted to come home after a 10-hour day and park in his own garage, but apparently, that was too much to ask because Brenda had decided that my driveway, specifically the apron right where it meets the street, was the perfect, temporary staging area for her HOA patrols. It started small, just 10 minutes here or there while she lectured the neighbors about their trash cans, but then it became 30 minutes, then an hour, and then overnight, and every time I asked her to move, she'd give me this patronizing little pat on the arm and say, "Oh Caleb, relax, I'm doing official community business. Surely you can park on the street for the greater good," as if her blocking me in was an act of charity. The breaking point didn't come with a bang, it came on a Tuesday, the day I had to get my dog, Buster, to the emergency vet because he'd gotten into some chocolate, and I rushed out to the garage, heart pounding, throwing the door open only to see that massive black wall of an SUV sitting there, silent and arrogant, blocking my exit. I ran across the street, pounded on Brenda's door, panic rising in my throat, and when she finally answered, she was holding a glass of Chardonnay and looked annoyed that I was interrupting her evening. I told her, "Brenda, move the car, I have an emergency," and she actually checked her watch, sighed, and said, "I'm in the middle of a board conference call, Caleb, you'll just have to wait, or maybe call an Uber," and then she closed the door in my face. I ended up carrying my 60-pound dog 3 blocks to a neighbor's house to borrow their car, and thankfully Buster was fine. But as I sat in that vet waiting room, shaking with adrenaline and rage, I realized that being polite was over, that diplomacy was dead, and that if Brenda wanted to play by the rules, I was going to beat her to death with the rulebook. I spent the next 3 nights doing what no sane person wants to do. I read the covenants, conditions, and restrictions of Oakhaven Creek, all 400 pages of legal jargon. I drank enough coffee to kill a horse, and somewhere around 3 a.m. on night 3, buried in the appendices under Vehicle Abatement, I found it, the golden ticket. Clause 14, Section B clearly stated that any vehicle impeding the ingress or egress of a primary residence for more than 15 minutes is subject to immediate removal at the homeowner's discretion, regardless of owner rank or title, which meant her presidential immunity was a fantasy she'd made up. I didn't just call a tow truck, I called the company my cousin works for, a guy named Sal who hates entitled people more than I do, and I told him to bring the heavy-duty flatbed. When Brenda finally came running out that morning, robe flapping in the wind, screaming that she was the president and that I was violating community harmony, I didn't yell back, I didn't get angry, I just handed the driver a photocopy of Clause 14 and took a sip of my coffee. She tried to block the truck with her body, shrieking, "You will regret this, Caleb, I will bury you in fines," but Sal just hooked up the Escalade, looked at me with a grin, and hauled that beast away, leaving nothing but tire marks and a stunned silence in the neighborhood. For a week, it was glorious, the street was clear, neighbors actually waved at me with this look of awe, like I'd just slain a dragon, but I knew Brenda, and I knew that people like her don't just take a loss, they regroup, they reload, and they come back harder. The retaliation started subtly, like a slow poison. First came the letters, official notices on heavy bond paper claiming my grass was 0.5 inches above regulation height, then a fine for my mailbox being a non-conforming shade of beige, which was ridiculous because it was the original mailbox the builder installed. She was weaponizing the bylaws, looking for any microscopic crack in my armor to bleed me dry, and honestly, it was exhausting. Checking my mail became a source of anxiety, wondering what new infraction she'd hallucinated. But then she got greedy. She decided that fines weren't enough. She wanted to humiliate me, to paint me as the villain of the neighborhood, so she escalated to fabrication. I woke up one Saturday to a notice from the county code enforcement taped to my door, not the HOA, the actual county, claiming they'd received reports of an illegal commercial chemical storage facility operating in my backyard. I'm a landscape architect, I have bags of mulch and maybe some fertilizer, but she had reported me as running a hazardous waste dump. An inspector showed up, a tired guy named Mike, who took one look at my tidy garden shed and shook his head, saying, "Look, man, the report included photos of industrial drums. Clearly this isn't that, but someone is trying to sweat you with paperwork." That's when I knew she wasn't just annoying, she was dangerous. She was willing to falsify evidence to destroy my reputation, and if she was going to fabricate a crime, I needed to catch her in the act of building the lie. I went full spycraft. I bought these high-definition night vision cameras, the kind hunters use, and I hid them in the trellis of my jasmine vines, pointing specifically at the side gate she claimed I was hauling chemicals through. I waited, and it didn't take long because Brenda's arrogance made her sloppy. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, the witching hour, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert, and I watched the live feed in disbelief as a figure in a dark tracksuit, who walked with Brenda's unmistakable stiff-legged gait, pried open my side gate. She was dragging 2 heavy contractor bags, struggling with them, puffing and puffing, and she dragged them right into the center of my backyard, ripped them open, and started scattering what looked like rusted paint cans and broken drywall all over my pristine lawn. She then stepped back, pulled out her phone, and started snapping flash photos, staging the crime scene she was going to report in the morning. I didn't run out there, I didn't turn on the lights, I just hit save on the video, called the non-emergency police line, and waited until she was back in her house before I went back to sleep with the most peaceful feeling I'd had in months. The next morning, when she marched over with 2 board members and that poor county inspector again, looking all smug and self-righteous, ready to expose my filth, I let them walk into the backyard, let them gasp at the mess, and let Brenda launch into her speech about protecting property values. Then, I calmly pulled out my iPad, connected it to the patio TV, and pressed play. You could hear a pin drop as the video showed the HOA president herself vandalizing a homeowner's property, and the look on her face wasn't fear, it was a glitch, like her brain couldn't compute that her absolute authority. The police arrived 10 minutes later, charged her with trespassing and filing false reports, and just like that, the Queen was dethroned, suspended from the board, and humiliated in front of the very people she tried to rule. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? The Wicked Witch is dead, the village rejoices, and the credits roll, but you have to understand that for someone like Brenda, power isn't a job, it's an addiction, and she was going through severe withdrawal. For about 3 months, Oakhaven Creek was paradise. No inspections, no passive-aggressive notes, people actually left their garage doors open without fear, but then, just as we were forgetting the trauma, a new character entered the stage. The HOA board, now scrambling without their dictator, announced they had hired an external, community consultant, to help restructure our bylaws, a woman named Diane Miller. I met Diane at the first town hall meeting. She was a mousy woman with oversized glasses, a brunette bob cut that looked a little too heavy, and a voice that was soft, almost raspy, totally different from Brenda's piercing shriek. She spoke about healing and restoring integrity, but there was something about her that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, a specific way she tapped her pen against the podium when she was impatient, a rhythm I had seen 1,000 times in my driveway. I started watching her closely, noticed she drove a rental car, parked 2 streets over, and never met anyone for coffee in the neighborhood, but the smoking gun came when she sent out a memo about aesthetic uniformity. In the 3rd paragraph, she used the phrase, "Disorder is the precursor to decay," a weird, archaic phrase that Brenda used to scream at kids who left their bikes on the lawn. My gut told me this was a disguise, a Scooby-Doo villain level of insanity, but I needed proof because claiming the new consultant was actually the disgraced ex-president in a wig sounded like I was the one losing my mind. I decided to set a trap, a verbal one. I knew Brenda's vanity was her Achilles heel, so I cornered Diane after a meeting, put on my best apologetic face, and said, "You know, Diane, I have to admit, the old president, Brenda. She was tough, but she had style. Honestly, nobody understood architectural integrity like she did. She was kind of a visionary." I watched Diane's face twitch, her eyes lit up behind those thick glasses, and she leaned in, dropping the raspy voice for just a second, slipping back into that haughty, familiar tone, and whispered, "Well, some people appreciate true leadership when they see it, Caleb. It takes a strong hand to mold a masterpiece." Gotcha. I didn't confront her there. I waited for the annual budget meeting, the big one where the whole neighborhood shows up. When Diane took the stage to propose a new rule that would ironically allow former board members to serve as advisors, a clear path for her own return, I stood up. I walked to the front, plugged my phone into the PA system, and said, "Before we vote, I think we should hear from the real architect of this plan." I played the audio clip I'd recorded of our conversation, then I played a clip of Brenda from a year ago yelling at a delivery driver. The cadence, the vocabulary, the arrogance, it was a perfect match. I looked at her and said, "Drop the act, Brenda, the wig doesn't fit." The room erupted, people were shouting, and Brenda, realizing the jig was up, ripped off the glasses, threw them on the table, and launched into a tirade about how we were unguided sheep who would ruin the community without her. She was escorted out by security, screaming that we were doomed, and honestly, it felt like an exorcism. But a week later, the lawsuit hit my doorstep, a defamation suit, thick as a phone book, suing me for emotional distress and claiming I had doctored the footage, doctored the audio, and conspired to ruin her livelihood. It was terrifying. She wasn't just coming for me, she was coming for my house, my savings, everything. But here is where the story takes a turn I never saw coming. In her desperate attempt to burn me down, Brenda had submitted hundreds of pages of emails and documents to the court to prove how hard she had worked for the community, trying to prove her dedication. My uncle Dom, a retired lawyer who looks like a bulldog and fights like one, was helping me go through her evidence, when he stopped, frowned, and said, "Caleb, look at this timestamp." We started digging through the files she had accidentally handed over in discovery, emails between the board members from before she was kicked out, emails she had kept as insurance. It turned out, Brenda wasn't just a control freak, she was the only thing standing in the way of a nightmare. The emails revealed that Jerry, the nice guy vice president who took over after Brenda, and two other board members were in deep talks with a commercial developer to sell off the community's greenbelt, the beautiful woods behind our houses, to build a strip mall and a storage unit facility. The reason Brenda had been so obsessed with property lines, with exact measurements, with guarding the perimeter, was because she was fighting a secret war against Jerry and the developers, using every bylaw she could to block the rezoning, to make the land unappealing to them. She was a tyrant, yes, she was a nightmare who towed my car and framed me for dumping trash, but she was also the only one who had been stopping Jerry from selling our backyard for parts. She was evil, but she was our evil. We took this evidence to the judge, and the lawsuit against me fell apart because the focus shifted entirely to the corruption scheme she had inadvertently exposed. Jerry and his cronies were investigated, the developer deal was killed instantly once the community found out, and the entire board was dissolved. The last time I saw Brenda was the day she moved out. Her house had been sold, and the moving truck was idling in the street. I was standing on my porch, the same spot where I watched her car get towed all those months ago. She walked down her driveway, paused, and looked at me. There was no anger anymore, just a tired, cold look. She walked over, stopped at the edge of my grass, careful not to step on it, and placed a small, white envelope on my retaining wall. "You won the war, Caleb," she said, her voice flat. "But you'll miss the soldier when the wolves come back." She got in her car and drove away. I opened the envelope, and inside was a single key, the master key to the HOA office and the community gates, and a sticky note that just said, "Watch Jerry." I stood there for a long time, looking at the quiet street, the green trees swaying in the wind that were almost turned into a parking lot. It's funny, I spent a year hating her, fighting her, obsessing over her downfall, and in the end, she saved the neighborhood by accident while trying to destroy me. Oakhaven Creek is peaceful now, the bylaws are relaxed, the grass is a little longer, and the mailboxes are different shades of beige. But every now and then, late at night, when a car drives by a little too slow, or I see a stranger measuring the property line, I catch myself standing at the window, checking the feed, wondering if maybe, just maybe, the neighborhood needs a monster to keep the other monsters away. So, tell me, was I right to take her down and risk the community, or does every paradise need a dragon at the gate? Let me know what you think in the comments, because honestly, I'm still not sure if I'm the hero of this story, or just the guy who left the door unlocked.